Welcome to the Unfolding Thought Podcast. My name is Eric Pratum. Today I'm speaking with Michael Whitmer, Vice President at an organization called Look East. Michael's work focuses on building trust between food producers, brands, and the people they serve through storytelling, marketing, and relationship building across the food supply chain. In our conversation, we explore what it takes to build trust in the food system, how consumer expectations are evolving, and why transparency, values, and narrative matter so much in shaping public perception. Michael discusses his experience working with national checkoff brands, meat brands, sustainability brands, and more. We also get into how food touches identity, belief, and culture, and why the stories we tell around it matter more than ever. If you care about food, business, or trust, I think you'll find something valuable in this episode. And now, I bring you Michael Whitmer. Michael, thank you for joining me. Would you mind telling me about yourself?
Eric, it's good to be here. Yeah, I have the short version and I have the long version. So the short one is I work in marketing communications, and the journey to get here has been an interesting one, but I really enjoy working in the food and food supply chain as a career. That's been really good. The long version starts with, when I was a kid, I was one of those kids that my parents bought me a pony, but it wasn't like we were a rich family or something. My dad had bought this pony for my sister and me, and they surprised us with it, which was really pretty cool. But I was walking around the pony, and the first day that we had it, and it kicked me in the face. And my mother was like, "Oh my gosh, get rid of this animal. It's hurt my baby." I was probably like 8 or 9 years old. And my dad was like, no, he needs to learn how to walk around a horse. And that was a really important kind of lesson of life that I did not want by getting, kicked by a horse, but I did learn it. And so we had, growing up, we had some horses, but they were just for fun. Wasn't like we were equestrians or anything like that. But that was my entry point into agriculture. So was having a pony as a kid. We lived in the city. We had this pony that we had, that kind of thing. Fast forward in my career, and my wife and I moved to St. Louis, and I started at Webster University and getting a degree in advertising and marketing, because I was just fascinated by what it takes to communicate to people. I thought that advertising was just a really fascinating field, and everything that I was seeing around me. So from there, I thought for sure we'd eventually move to Chicago, and I'd work for a big advertising agency or something like that. But I got a job working for an agency in St. Louis that predominantly worked in agriculture, and didn't really know a lot about agriculture, but I quickly learned, and it was really amazing to start to understand what it takes to get food to our tables, the extent at which that happens, and the process is pretty phenomenal. And so being a person who was on, I didn't know agriculture as a farming kid. I wasn't a farming kid or anything, but starting to learn these things, I really became so respectful of what it takes to get food to the table, and really wanting to see that promoted in the right types of way. I was doing a good job, this was a good place for me to be. I worked at Osborne and Barr for quite a while, worked at a couple of other agencies before moving to an animal health company. And I worked in global marketing for an animal health company. And that was my exposure to working with a variety of different cultures and a variety of different marketing teams in different areas, and understanding how, in St. Louis, in our headquarters, we were coming up with all these great strategies, and then it was supposed to be applied, somewhere in Thailand or in the UK. And it just didn't do what it was supposed to do. It was a classic example of the headquarters coming up with an idea and not really understanding how to contextualize that information. But the more I traveled, the more I spent time with teams, the more I got. I had some really great bosses who just taught me how to understand and be able to translate a lot of, in my instance, a lot of scientific information into something that was valuable for customers of the company. And really enjoyed that work. And I did a lot of that work with poultry, with chickens. So learned a lot about chickens. And from there, I went to actually work with the United Soybean Board back through the agency that I had started with. But working for the United Soybean Board was a group of farmers who've come together to kind of pool their money together to try to promote soybeans. And so, because I understood marketing, because I understood advertising, because I understood chickens, who are the biggest eaters of soybeans, there was a great opportunity for me to learn to help support the organization. What I learned in that was a coalition of farmers, a coalition of any kind, trying to make decisions about how to operate the most effectively, was a unique challenge, that's for sure. And USB is not a government entity, but there are a lot of parallels to kind of government work. So a whole new sector to understanding how some of that was, which also led to understanding a little bit more about the political environment and how much that has an impact on our everyday life. And we know that at a big level, but actually legislation that changes both the way farming practices happen, food labeling happens, the way that our food gets to the table is really impacted by information or misinformation that is within legislators or governing bodies. So how important it is to be able to share valuable information with all kinds of stakeholders, which is what has led me then to the work that I do at Look East, the agency that I'm at now, where we predominantly focus on stakeholder engagement in the food supply chain. Stakeholders are everybody from all of us as consumers, through all the development of the product, from the farmer to the manufacturing process, to the way that product is put into a box or shipped, how it is put on a shelf, and the impact that makes to us and the decisions that we have to face every day in feeding our families. So I'm really thrilled to be able to be working and doing this kind of work that I've come to love. Didn't know I was going to be there, but all from, the pony. Led me all the way to this place, and I'm happy about that. So that's the long story, Eric.
I'm going to ask you about two things. Sorry, I'm going to state one thing and then ask you about another. So for anyone that is not aware of groups like the United Soybean Board and other what they refer to as checkoffs, if you think about a lot of agricultural commodities, an individual soybean farmer could have 10,000 acres of soybeans one year, could be corn the next year. They may have soybeans on one field and corn on the next field. But regardless, let's look at just one commodity. When those soybeans are harvested, even if you have 10,000 acres, you could have 100,000 acres. The way that supply chains work and the way that marketing and sales work for things like this is that it just would not make sense for an individual farmer to undertake some marketing or sales campaign to get a chicken farmer in Nigeria or a hog farmer in China to purchase my soybeans. The supply chains work in such a way where everybody's soybeans, for the most part, go to one grain silo or one shipper or whatever. And I'm glossing over a lot of details here, but fundamentally, it just does not make sense for an individual to market and sell their product. And so these coalitions essentially have formed in different commodities, and they more or less do the marketing on behalf of the commodity. Now, there are other businesses that handle the sales because I, as a soybean farmer, will, in many cases, then sell my soybeans to organizations, I believe, like Cargill or something like that, who will then put them into containers and sell containers of soybeans or bushels or pounds of soybean oil or whatever it is to, well, first and foremost, the processors, and that may be a Cargill as well, but then eventually to people that are going to produce the products or use those inputs, such as feeding pigs or producing soy plastics or whatever else. So I state that in large part because I have worked with these organizations as well. But until about 6.5 years ago, this was completely foreign to me. I never thought about the fact that an individual farmer would not sell to that user of their product. Really, they sell to middlemen, if I can call it that. So that's the first statement, I guess. And then the second is, you and I have talked before about Look East, and I think there's a lot potentially to say about what makes your organization unique. And you hinted at it with the stakeholder engagement, but I want to give you an opportunity to talk about the Center for Food Integrity before we come back around to something that I think was hinted at when you said, that your father said you needed to learn how to act around horses or ponies or whatever it was, how to walk around them safely. And so I'm going to come back to that. But as I understand it, Look East is a partner or manager or has some sort of involvement in the Center for Food Integrity. And that relates to the work that Look East does. So can you tell me about that organization?
Sure, I sure can. Yeah, the Center for Food Integrity is really an opportunity for the entire supply chain to come together around particular issues that they're facing from end to end. So from the farmer all the way through processing, all the way to retail, even into into the grocery store or into the quick serve restaurant that you may experience. So we have folks who participate at the Center for Food Integrity in this kind of coalition to understand the challenges that are happening to the supply chain, to the totality of the chain. And really being organized like that, we have the opportunity to talk about issues like sustainability and its impact on the whole supply chain. That's scope 3 emissions. That's everything from how products get, and there's a variety of different things there. But then also the changing perception consumers have about food and what they consider true about food in the food supply chain. So everybody in the supply chain wants to know what consumers are saying and thinking about that, about food at that general level. And so as an organization, we do a lot of research about that. We share that information. We share a lot of factual and data information with our members. And so on that kind of level, that is, how do we bring everybody together to help take care of some of these concerns or issues? That's where we've got this coalition built, and the Center for Food Integrity does that. The Center for Food Integrity hires folks like me and others as our staff, so the staff for the organization. And so at Look East, that I work for, and my client, if you could say it like that, is the Center for Food Integrity. But as a Look East organization, we're really focused on how does those individual companies bring that information to light for their brands or for the stakeholders that they're engaged with. So if it is on more of a marketing communications, sales side, it would be something that is like, how are you understanding what consumer behavior is driving decisions, and how do you then, with shared values, communicate to your target audience? There are a variety of other stakeholders who are involved beyond the consumer. So your employee engagement, or there are a lot of community engagements that happen, and so we help different companies manage their reputation at the brand level or at the company level alongside, the community involvement that they have. And we do that with a lot of strategic initiatives that, help us everything from influencer engagement to more like public relations, media management, that sort of thing. So that is how the Center for Food Integrity helps kind of collectively, and how Look East helps on a more individual basis.
Is it fair for me to think that the word integrity in the Center for Food Integrity implies not necessarily that you're promoting the foods that are quote unquote whole or organic or non-GMO or whatever? Now, you may do those things at times, but rather that when the word integrity in the name has more to do with keeping a sense of integrity with the presentation of the food and the products, with the public's or the consumer's understanding. So even if an organization was participating with the Center for Food Integrity and their food is processed in one manner or another, or ultra processed for all I know, that some of the work that you're doing is aligned with or intended to ensure that there is integrity between the reality of that food production, processing, supply chain, and what is presented to and understood by the consumer.
Yes. The integrity really does lend itself into making sure that there is accurate information available to consumers. What we understand is that as consumers, and then also as those who were being communicated to, that the way that people digest or receive information first is about how they feel about it or think about it in the information that is coming in. So when we're talking with somebody, we're coming to somebody with a shared value that we agree with together. We're at least starting in a position of understanding that you and I both want to be able to make healthy choices for our families. And then from there, how do we decide what is healthy? And so we can continue the conversation from there. If we start the conversation with healthy equals this scientific information that we have, and so then therefore you should eat healthy, consumers, the rest of us, we really disengage from that. So at the Center for Food Integrity, what we're also helping the industry do is how do you change the way you talk about what is valuable for consumers? And at the same time, how do we have consumers be able to engage with factual, relevant information that is, to the point you were just saying, is accurate in representing what it takes for their food to be on the grocery store shelves. So in a time of social media overload, there is a lot of misinformation that comes towards people, and being able to just like take that information in and know what to do with it is really challenging. And so we really focus on how can we bring factual, relevant information to consumers, and do it in a way that they're going to be able to understand and engage with, not just science for the sake of it, but really some of the things that are going to help them to make good decisions in the future.
Thank you. And I'm going to state this because I so want to ask you about it, but I also want to get to a topic mentioned earlier. So I'm just going to state it because maybe it will be a follow-up conversation, but it seems to me like there's something to be explored around the quote or the idea that many people have heard, that something like a lie can make it halfway around the world or whatever before the truth even gets its pants on or shoes on or whatever. And I think there's a lot to be explored as it relates to the work that you're doing. However, I think you can speak a lot to learning from experience and learning from others. And so I want to go back to getting kicked by the pony, and I forget exactly how it was that you put it, but fundamentally, your father had said, well, he's got to learn. And the implication being that there's some value in learning. And even I think that there is a tie-in potentially to, you were talking about working in the global, what was it? The global food brand, animal health. That's what it was. You were talking about working in animal health and how headquarters would develop something, and they, in one manner of presentation or positioning, they didn't necessarily understand the realities on the ground. And I'm seeing some parallels here, in that in a lot of organizations, we make a decision or we produce something and we are sort of divorced from the consequences. So you may have produced a product or a service and it's intended to be used by that farmer out in the field or on the ground, and they deal with the consequences, and you don't have the opportunity to learn from them. It's almost like you bought the pony or your father bought the pony, you got kicked in the face, but he never heard that you got kicked in the face, or he heard about it and he just explains it away. And so I bring this up because you and I have talked before, and you have a nature, I think, about you. You have a set of behaviors or traits that are very, sort of mentor like. And I'm lacking for a better word, but like you have a distinct interest in learning from others, and also ensuring that others get the best exposure that they can to your knowledge, and to improve their careers through their bosses or whatever else. So do you think that some of that interest and some of that disposition came through, for example, your father not protecting you and in a safe space, let's say, right? I don't want to impugn your father without him being here. That I'm guessing that you could have really been hurt, but that was unlikely. And so do you think that your desire to mentor, the value that you place on finding mentors or teachers or coaches yourself, perhaps comes in part from the example that was set by your father?
Yeah, I think another quote from my father that I hold on to often is, he would say, "If you pay attention, you can learn something new every day." And I've held on to that because I think what's embedded in that is really curiosity for the life that we live, for the environment we are in and around. So his perspective was one that was, let's try it and see kind of attitude. And that carried over into my own curiosity about things, and just like wondering about stuff, and kind of how does it work on a really practical level? How does it work on a theoretical level about things? And tinkering, that sort of thing. And then I think that married up with being kicked by a horse, being kicked by a pony, it was painful. That was a painful experience that I could have run from or learned from. And my mother was ready to run from that for sure. I mean, she was like, "No, I want to protect Michael from this pain." And I like that a lot. I want to be protected from the pain of situations. And he saw it as a learning opportunity out of a painful experience. So we can have value in even the painful experiences, which I have held on to when I have had a lot of painful experiences, as we all do in our life. And those painful experiences are something that I can learn from, or I can run from, freeze, flight, whatever that saying is. But and so I think that is certainly a mixture of things that have brought me to the place where my curiosity plus a willingness to learn from other people And I want other people to experience less pain than I did if they can. So sharing what has happened to me or my experience or what I've learned or picked up from comes out of me pretty naturally because I really want the benefit for somebody else that they don't have to experience this, whatever kind of pain it is, or to know that you're normal feeling that hurts. That's normal. And sometimes that's what we need is the encouragement to know that you're on the right track, even if it feels off the track in some way. And that sort of thing. So I think those are the things that kind of bring that together for me as a kind of my natural disposition is to want to be alongside somebody and help them grow.
Do you see, like I referenced, you working in animal health and headquarters is divorced a bit or is away, separated from some of the consequences of its decisions? Do you see that there are certain situations or maybe there's a trajectory with business or society generally where we're either protected or divorced from the consequences of our actions or from putting up with hard situations in a way that I'm envisioning your headquarters was?
I sort of see it, I guess, Eric, in the way that that sometimes parts of the organization can be myopically focused on one thing, one aspect, maybe a particular key indicator. Profit, of course, would be one of those. And then neglect to think about all of the other things that it takes to make that happen for the long term, in a sustainable way. You can cut all kinds of costs and bring profit to the organization. And then eventually that runs out and you have to invest. You have to get back to it. So that's the natural part of business. So I think that there can definitely be the insular kind of view, maybe in the C-suite sometimes, about what should we be doing, and that we haven't really considered all of the stakeholders and the impact on the stakeholders overall. And it's the organizations that have the best kind of feedback loops, the ones that pay attention to that understand some of those types of things. But often what happens, I think, is that the results or the kind of the disconnect are because of the lagging indicators that didn't work, rather than any sort of leading indicators up front that this was going to be the right input to be able to have the right kind of output. So if I'm coming up with a campaign or I'm coming up with a sales strategy devoid of what the rest of the organization is doing, then I might be able to check off on my goal document, I did the plan. Check. I fulfilled what I was required to do to get my bonus today. Devoid of what it means to the rest of the organization, that is such a short-term view of what the impact is that we're supposed to be making and doing. If my view is, how does this information and the things that I'm creating affecting my customer, which may be the sales team because it's affecting their customer, who is ultimately the one who's buying it. If I'm thinking about those kinds of things, then I can finish my campaign, but it might look a little different, maybe not as exciting as I wanted it to be, in my insular kind of view, because it's supposed to benefit the audience long term. I think I learned a lot about those kinds of things, and taking feedback in and understanding what something meant in the context, how to have kind of a hypothesis for what you think it may be, and testing it with different groups of people in order to know that it might work or not work, or what would the ramifications of that stuff be. So I think that depending on the kind of organization that you're in, the just doing a task and then checking that off and like pushing it on to somebody else is a problem with the mentality of the organization and the culture that is there, rather than what is our collective purpose that we're trying to achieve together.
Do you think it's easier nowadays if I'm in the workplace to make a bad decision and then be uncomfortable, but not have to deal with learning from that? Or in society more broadly, do you think that it's easier to get in an argument with someone on social media and to just block them, or to unfriend someone on Facebook during election season so that I don't have to deal with the messiness of being human, or don't have to deal with the consequences of my actions? And therefore, if you agree with me, do you think it's also harder to learn from the positives and negatives of getting kicked in the face by a horse or making a bad decision at headquarters?
No, I don't agree with you, Eric. I'm going to say it that way just to kind of be contrarian a little bit. But and I would say that I think it's probably human nature that we want to avoid these kinds of situations, and there were just other ways we did it. Now it is so much more prominent that you can turn on or off the relationships that you want. Where because of proximity, you couldn't necessarily have, if you worked in an office in the 70s, then, 1970, you went into that office and you were with those people and around there. But the same attitudes existed and the same mechanisms for how we align or change or the conversation or those sorts of things, I think, existed. Now we are in a place, and definitely the generations that are coming up are being able to filter through to their own, to be able to put ourselves into our own ecosystems in an easier way than maybe you were, several decades ago. Now what we're seeing is that you're able to put yourself into your own echo chamber quickly, and you can do that. I think that the way that we dealt with conflicts at work and communication gaps and those sorts of things, when you were forced to be around people and and you had to kind of deal with those situations, you got more practice at it. And so you either could use that and like learn from it and then be able to move on, or you watch somebody else have that. I mean, I think actually one of probably the real challenges to having an online environment and people learning to work in this online environment is that you don't get to observe other behavior in like you did in the workplace. Wow, man, when Tanya talked to Jim and they had it out, I do not want that, so I'm going to act differently. You don't really get as much of that in an online environment, so you can be selective about, the kind of meetings that you're in or the way that you talk to people. So I think that is harder. I do agree with you in that way that like now I don't have to, I'm not, I can choose when I want to engage and not engage, and I don't even have to be around other situations if I don't want to be. But I think that the kind of fundamentally, humans have kind of, this is how we operate. This is how we do it. In our current context, we can hide behind our online environment so easily. And that probably stunts growth or takes longer than to understand how to communicate effectively or to get over some of those things. But it affects you no matter what. If you just don't engage, it still affects you. And so now the next situation you're in that is uncomfortable, you may be even less inclined to connect or work through a challenge. So I don't know that I'm answering your question as much as to say that I think that this has always been something that we as people need to work on and work through. The best kinds of cultures and environments create the opportunity to work through those things together.
I think what I hear you saying is that, yes, human nature remains the same. Some of us are predisposed to just avoid learning from getting kicked by the pony. And some of us are just a little bit more committed to maybe it's worth it to deal with an uncomfortable situation for some greater good. Human nature is what it is. But maybe what has changed is that thing, like I was saying, of I just and progressively over time better at, or it has become easier for me to avoid getting into the uncomfortable situation in the first place. Is that right?
To poke on that a little bit more, I would say, if we kind of step back from that situation, if in my case I walked around the horse and I got kicked by the pony, and then I learned from that, so I behaved differently when I walked around the pony. Then I learned that I want to be with the pony, but I want to be with it in a way that is going to be safe for me. If I were to get kicked by the pony and be like, I'm not going to be around ponies anymore, then I have learned that what I want is to not have pain. And so I'm not even going to engage with the pony. I'm not even going to be in that situation because I've learned I don't want the pain. So I learned something. We learned something. We created a path. It just was a path. Did I even realize that path that I created for myself by not being around horses anymore, it kept me from some real enjoyment in my life. If I could have just gotten through the pain of a little bit of learning how to walk around the horse, I could have really enjoyed the experience of having, be with the pony. And which now that I'm thinking about that a little bit more, maybe that's what my dad was going for, was like the cost of, you're going to learn something one way or another. You're going to learn it. Are you going to learn how to be around that horse and enjoy it in the right kind of way, in the right relationship? Or are you going to learn that you don't want to be here? And we often, I think, can fall into the trap of, well, I didn't want to get hurt, and so I just won't engage with that anymore. I won't even be in that position. And I made that choice. I didn't even realize I made that choice. I just thought that I just walked away from it. But you did make a choice subconsciously, or deeper in your person. You've made a choice and you've learned to then go about that. And we as people, again, back to kind of the human nature of it all, is that we have figured out how to cope with everything. We figured it out. And in some way, our coping mechanisms are the kinds of things that put us back in the position where we want to be. Like, is this safe? Is this no harm? Is there no pain, rather? And that it takes my mental brain to say, no, wait a minute, brain. I do want to experience things that might be uncomfortable for me because I want something better on the other side. So brain, you're telling me get away from the horse, but because I emotionally, that's what I want to do. But what I need to do is I need to learn how to adapt to this situation and be different about it. And I think that is, so I'm just kind of coming back to I think the learning happens. We learn because that's how we are operating. It's like, okay, I don't want that result again, so I'm going to do this other thing. What becomes in maturity, as you kind of mature, I think what you understand is a little bit more about the choices that you made by not making a choice, or the opportunity cost. Rarely in business are we actually saying, hey, what's the opportunity cost of this? Because what we know is that if we reduce the expenditure on this thing, we're going to save some money. But the opportunity cost is less opportunity for that thing to produce for the long term. So in that way, it's, kind of bringing it back into the business realm like that. I think we made the choice. We just didn't even realize we hadn't considered opportunity cost.
So then how does mentorship affect this? How does having a parent, whether it's the parent who I think makes the choice for you, perhaps by taking the pony away, or having a manager who enables you to avoid getting in the next situation where you might get kicked. You learn one thing or another from getting in an argument or saying something that was not nice to Tanya, and you have the potential of a mentor, manager, leader, coach, someone who can give you input, advice to influence your thinking or your decision. And I mentioned you having a presentation or an interest in mentorship. How does mentorship influence what might be the easy decision or the lack of decision that you might make when put in a painful situation?
Yeah, I think that mentorship is really pretty critical to our development as leaders. And when I think of mentorship, it's actually pretty broad. In a traditional sense, somebody who's older, farther along, more seasoned, is really helpful has been very helpful to me. I've had a lot of people in my life that I've looked up to, and I wanted to emulate their career, or I like the way they think, and so I want to be around them. And those people who have been either relationships of mine that I've said, hey, can I tell you about a situation and tell me what you think about it type situation, or even somebody professionally as a coach who I'm going to and saying, hey, I'm working through these kinds of things. I want somebody from the outside helping me think strategically about that or coaching me on what to do. So I've had it, on a professional level and on this personal level. But then I also have a layer of peers, people who are pretty much the same stage of life as me. And so I'm talking about, what's happening at work, but I'm also talking about what's happening with my kids. And I'm also talking about what is happening with my wife and how all these kind of things come together with people who are experiencing the same thing or, same stage of life. And we're with each other in what we are. So on that kind of that peer level. And then, there are people who I intentionally invest in or intentionally are mentoring because I think that, I want to share what I've learned. They've said they wanted to learn something from me, so I'm sharing that with them. They teach me as much as I teach them, actually. That and the mentoring part of the relationship is where I'm sharing something, and it is the reflection in our conversation that makes me go, I hadn't really thought about it like that from your perspective as a young person doing this kind of thing. So these like levels of mentorship is a way to be thinking about the kinds of relationships that we have and how they interact with us. So I think that those are really important to have, and to have them, and they come and go. It's not like you have the same mentors all the time, or that, that there's seasons of life where, different kinds of people can be really involved. You can be really involved, or they can be really involved with you. There are a lot of the mentors that I have that I haven't talked to in a year or two, but I know that if I texted them or called them, we could pick right up in our relationship or in the questions that I have. There are some people who I talk to regularly who, because I'm continually asking them their opinion about something. What I've found is that probably the most important mentors in my life, like the way they have mentored me that has been the most impactful, is that they mostly listen and they mostly question in the most kind of encouraging way. They actually don't give me a lot of advice, even though I'm like, no, I want you to tell me what to do. And they're like, well, tell me what you would do. And then we talk through that. And so really as a mentor, someone who listens, who it questions and helps me to think through things has been the most beneficial. So then as a mentee, as somebody who's listening, I have to be really open to being honest about what I'm talking about and how I'm projecting. And so as a mentee, when I'm talking to my mentors, I need to be honest. If I sugarcoat or cover up or try to make myself look a little bit better in the situations that I'm in, usually they can tell. But it also doesn't do me any good when they're like, well, you seem to be doing it right. Well, oh, that's not happening. So how, being honest, being really active in the relationship. So I pursue them. I pursue the guys that I need their advice. So the people in my life that I'm like, I need help working through this stuff. I'm active in going after those things, not passive about it. And then when they do encourage me to do something, I'm pretty open to it. I'm pretty open to hear what they have to say. Now, rarely do I take what they say and do it blindly. What tends to happen is that they say something, I don't like it. It makes me mad. They say I should do it in a way, and I'm like, nuh-uh. And I'm still open to them so that later as I begin to process, I go like, oh man, that really is good advice. Oh, that really is pretty profound. I do need to pursue that line of thinking. And so I find that as a mentee, you got to be open. And usually it's when you like have this reaction of no way, that's usually when you got to lean in to it. So anyway, that's kind of how I see the mentor-mentee relationship and how it's worked for me.
If you had to say, I really think you should keep in mind X and do Y and look for Z related to mentorship, what would you suggest for someone early in their career?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I would suggest somebody who is earlier in their career, who is eager to grow and really to kind of be the best that they can be, is to find somebody in the company that you admire the way they think, not necessarily what it is that they do, but the way they think. And that could be somebody who's in a completely different department. But you've observed some behavior that you like, wow, I really like the way you think. And to invite them to lunch or coffee and ask them questions about how they got to where they are. Start by being active in pursuing somebody who you're seeing some characteristics that you really admire in some way. I think in a company, it's the easiest to be able to say, well, how did you get to where you are in the roles that you're in and what you did? And because you have that shared experience of the company that you're working in. You can do that without it being the person in a company. It could be somebody in some other aspect adjacent in your life, for sure. And there can be a lot of value in that too. But for somebody who's new in their career, just finding somebody else. And you know what? People like being asked about their opinion. So if you go to a senior VP and you say, hey, I would like, can I take you to coffee or lunch so I could ask you some about your career? The likelihood of them saying yes is pretty high. It can be very nerve-wracking to go ask a question like that, to send an email request like that, to be able to put yourself out there like that. That can be very challenging, but the return on that investment is real high. And the likelihood of getting somebody to talk with you is pretty good. So I'd say that's a good first step. Now, if you're looking for something that is a little bit more specific in that you want to overcome some particular component, and you're looking for somebody to help you in a more like let's continue to meet regularly for a certain amount of time, then a way to do that is definitely with as you meet somebody in the company who's willing to do that, setting some parameters for, could we meet every other week for 3 months? And that I could talk specifically about this thing or whatever. I think putting some parameters around it really helps to have a beginning and an end to a mentorship in the kind of workplace. If you're at a more senior level and that isn't available to you in your work environment, then having a coach, just like you were mentioning, Eric, I've had many coaches that have been very beneficial to me. Hiring a business coach can be somebody who helps you to challenge your own thinking, because you're at a level that's just not really available to you within the work context. And so that, again, with kind of a beginning and an end, a lot of those kind of coaches have a program they walk people through. And it is also like, if you don't know what it is, I know I want to grow, but I don't really know how or what to do, then a coach can be really good for giving you a framework for how to start to work through some of those things, even discovering what it is that I need to work through. So I think those are two kind of practice. You can do that as young in your career too. You should, but when you're in a more senior level role, it's harder to find somebody in the company to do that with sometimes. And it not. I mean, when you're in a senior role, I think peer relationships can get touchy and difficult because you can get into gossip real fast, and that you want to avoid that. So for somebody at a more senior level, having an outside coach can be very helpful.
After I have reached out to someone and said, can I ask you some questions? Can I pick your brain? Whatever the phrasing is, would you mind mentoring me? Are there things that I can do to ensure that I'm a good mentee or that I'm getting the most out of that experience?
There certainly is. There's certainly a lot of things that you can do. I think the first one, being active, being proactive in the relationship, is really important. As a mentee, as you're somebody who is wanting to engage with somebody and extract some value from what they have for you, you want to pursue that. So you're not waiting for to ask, well, can we meet again? Or I'll wait until they say it's okay. You're asking, could we meet in 2 weeks? Could I do this and show it to you? You're being proactive in the way that you're, interacting. I think along with that too is really being honest about where you're coming from. And when they ask you a question, be upfront, be honest about it, that you don't know. I don't know the answer to this, or I think this is what I'm thinking. I don't really, I don't know if this is a good idea or not. Those types of just being honest, and not trying to somehow present yourself in a way that is, I'm better than, I want you to perceive me, mentor, as somebody who's really got it together. So I'm going to present in a certain way. Resist that urge and lean into the opportunity to be honest where you are about things. And then when they give you tasks, assignments, things to do them. If they tell you to read a book or to think about it in a particular kind of way, do that and follow up or whatever. There have been many times where somebody has said to me, you should write this down and journal about it, or whatever. Here, think about this and write this in a way. And I used to be resistant to that, but now I'm a pretty avid journaler, because it didn't matter what it was that I wrote down. It's that I processed it, and they were teaching me how to process it. And so if I would have been like, nah, I don't journal, I don't do that, then I would have missed out on a really beneficial part of what this mentor was saying to me.
You have been getting more and more active on LinkedIn, and is mentorship something that you're talking more about in your, sort of publicly distributed thinking?
It is. It really is. I talk a lot on my profile on LinkedIn, which I'd love everybody to connect. It's great to meet people, because it's community. Because it's an interesting business community. LinkedIn is, where there is a lot of sharing back and forth. What I'm attempting to do is to add value to the people who are around me by talking about some of these things in what it means to have good mentorship, what it means to be a good mentee. Also, what are some of the practical things that you can do in just business development as you are an emerging leader? What are some of the things that you need to know? At the same time, I'm being mentored on LinkedIn by all the other people who I read and follow and look at and see their information and comment about things that are like, wow, this is really good information about mindset, about leadership techniques, about really practical ways to communicate, how to use AI in ways we haven't thought about them before, being mentored even by interacting on the platform. So the opportunity for me to kind of put information out in the world is to share what I know, is to be able to help somebody else to either be curious about a situation or maybe not get kicked in the face if they can avoid it. Or at least, hey, I was kicked in the face too, and it hurts, and we can both talk about that. And so if I'm putting that out of the world with the attempt to bring value to people, and I also am getting a lot of value out of my feed on LinkedIn. I really like LinkedIn because it is pretty specific to the business environment. You can get sucked into a lot of rabbit holes on other social media platforms that is an algorithm creating an algorithm, sequence for you. And where on LinkedIn, it is still doing that, but it is at least with some, micro learning happening and some engagement with your audience that can help you to be better in this particular area of business and life.
Do you think that there is a particular value for the general listener here of being more active, whether it's through sharing their own thoughts or it's commenting or creating content or being a thought leader?
Absolutely. I think that is very valuable. Mainly because the way that we learn and we take in information, but it's when we articulate it and are able to teach it that it has made its way all the way through the learning journey. And so you can be a consumer of a lot of information. If you are consuming something and it is resonating with you, or you're taking something away from that, being able to share that on a platform like LinkedIn or some other place and say, what this person did, I thought about it like this, and that's making me think now like that. That's valuable for us to all see that process. So I comment on a lot of people's LinkedIn profiles where I'm like, hey, thanks for this information that you shared. I didn't know this before, and now I do. That added a lot of value to me. So I then share it to my group of people to say, I learned this. I didn't know before. You might want to know this too. Here is that information. Being in the position that I'm in, I am farther along in my career to have some of my own thoughts about how those things are relating to business today. That I can create my own content that is my take on the things that are going on, and that can be valuable to the types of people that I interact with and are around. But I think as a general listener to this podcast, to any kind of interaction you have with it, is what did you take away from this? How did it impact you? What did you think about it? Agree or disagree? In fact, most of the time, if you disagree, that's where the magic happens. So if you think, boy, this guy's full of it, say that so that there can be the conversation about why is that? And so I think that it is really important for us to be sharing our own thoughts about situations. And that's where I narrow it to the business field that we are working in, because what I ate for breakfast, I think is much less relevant than what I think about how we use strategic thought or cognitive biases to change the way that we operate. I think that's much more relevant than a picture of my cat, although I like to post pictures of my cat. So,
do you think that the importance of sharing or engaging in a place like LinkedIn, and we don't have to stick there, but just using it as a place where I think you have a higher chance of encountering things that will influence your career? Do you think that importance is changing over time? Is it becoming more and more important? Or in certain respects, would you say it is as important as it has ever been? It remains as important as it has ever been?
I think it is more important than it has been because, as you and I were talking earlier about the physical distance from people, you're not getting as much overhearing a conversation between two other colleagues about a situation that you may face in the future, and then absorbing that, because we're not set up for that as much. Or you don't have opportunities to be, well, let me say it this way. There's a much easier opportunity to be in the middle of a conversation between two CEOs on LinkedIn or on on another platform where there's a podcast. So listening to this podcast now and gleaning things of it creates an opportunity for somebody to listen in and to observe things that they would not have if we were in the office. You and I, Eric, are working together, and they weren't there. They couldn't. Now they get to. So take advantage of the opportunities to listen into conversations that are happening among people that you respect and find really worthwhile. So that it's more important now that you take advantage of the technology and the opportunity that we have to do that than you had access to when you were, a few decades ago.
And if I've understood you correctly, there is a similar kind of importance or opportunity for not just getting access to those people or those conversations or those thoughts. There's a similar opportunity to sharing. If you know something, you can build your brand. You can potentially connect with other people because somebody sees this. And like you said, somebody can say back to you, I never thought about this. Or if not for you, I would not have been exposed to this thing. So it's not just getting access to someone's thoughts. It's also you, Michael, or you, Eric, can expose yourself to other people.
Yeah. Yes.
Michael, you mentioned you asked people, please do connect with you. Like I said, I think maybe 2 times, I've seen you getting more active. And, this is really our second in-depth conversation. I was very impressed the first time. You're a very thoughtful and intelligent person. And
you're a good host, Eric.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. There was quite a bit that we talked about in our first conversation that was about our children, for example, and that was very impactful for me. So, I know we didn't talk so much about that, but some of what we talked about here was applicable across, our personal and professional lives, if we can make those distinct. And I realize that they often are not. But so I appreciate you being here. I'm going to point people to some of the things that you've mentioned, like Look East and the Center for Food Integrity and your LinkedIn profile. And I will ask you 2 things. One is there anything else you would point people to or anything else you would ask them to do? And the second thing is, do you have any parting words of wisdom or things you want to leave us with before we wrap up?
I would say so. In an age of AI where all information is accessible to you all the time, use AI as an opportunity to clarify your thinking, not to do the thinking for you. Let it challenge you to operate. Don't make it your operation. And there have been a lot of people, a lot of very smart people who are talking about AI is a great assistant and a terrible master. Don't let it become your master. And that comes from being curious about all kinds of other things that are in life besides AI or what it can do. But let it be your assistant in the things that you're doing. So I think as it becomes more ubiquitous and we have more AI native people, the opportunity to let it do the strategic thinking or to do the critical thinking will be very tempting. And we have to fight that with all of our humanity to help people to continue to be critical thinkers and to operate at the kind of level that is our humanity. So that's what I would say is something else I would want to add to our conversation today. I think that in terms of moving forward in life, there is so much good that is available. There's a lot that feels like pressure on all of us all the time. And so having good relationships, having people around, having mentors, having friendships like this one with you, Eric, is the kind of thing that keeps us going, and I hope it will keep you going. Keep help you to think through. We're in this together. We're in this life together, and there's a lot of people that can feel alone and distant, and like this is only happening to me. And while it is, you're the only one who can feel it that way. There's a lot of, everybody has had some sort of experience that is similar. And it's in that shared similar experience that we can be together and survive some of the stuff that is really tough right now.
I love that. Both of them, but I feel like the first thing is some great guidance, and I think the second thing that you shared there is great guidance, but also potentially inspirational. And so I appreciate you sharing that. And Michael, I hope that I said it earlier, but if I didn't, thank you for being here. I'm really glad that you agreed to join me. It's been a long conversation, getting here. And as I just said a minute ago, I enjoyed our first conversation in depth, and I really enjoyed this one. So thank you for recording with me.
Yeah. Thank you very much for the opportunity, Eric. I really enjoyed it.
Hey, thank you for listening. I hope you got a lot out of today's conversation. If you enjoyed the episode, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. And please share it with someone you know who'd appreciate this kind of information. If you want to bring this kind of thinking to your own business, check out mine at inboundandagile.com. We specialize in helping leaders with challenges around marketing, communications, and leadership so they can inspire real action in their people and audiences. Thanks again for listening, and I hope you'll come back for future episodes.